Welcome to the unit the CBC was talking about where we had some tenant issues. So this is the unit here. You guys can walk in and see for yourselves. We got some spray paint, all that's gone, and now all you can see is just some destroyed floors, destroyed door, tons of little holes and knocks in the wall and things like that. You've got spray paint on the windows, another window there, it's been completely broken. As you can see, thousands in damage, as well as having to actually pay him cash for keys for him to actually leave. There's lots of these situations happening here in Ontario.
Recently, my good friend Mike Rosehart had an article and actually a radio broadcast about him being the landlord here in London, Ontario by CBC. Now, this wasn't necessarily the most flattering article and it wasn't framed very well from the landlord's perspective. And I really want to share that there is truly two sides to each story. So in this video, we're going to kind of hear Mike Rosehart's full side of his story related to the CBC article. If you guys haven't checked it out, we're going to have links to everything in the video description down below. But I think this is a very useful video that all of you guys should watch through its entirety, because it's important to understand that not everything is roses and sunshine when it comes to being a landlord. And at the same time, there's a lot of, unfortunately, there's a lot of negative narratives against landlords and real estate investors, and it's something that we need to be acutely aware of if you want to become an investor and you want to grow to a sizable portfolio, if you want to be a real estate influencer, a social media person. There's a lot of different factors to consider, and myself and Mike really dive into it in this video. Smash that like button, guys. Hit the subscribe button if you're new to my channel, and please leave an encouraging comment in this video for Mike Rosehart, because he's been on a roller coaster as an investor.
Welcome to the unit the CBC was talking about where we had some tenant issues. So this is the unit here. You guys can walk in and see for yourselves. We got some spray paint. We had camera removed. Had to grind the door deadbolt off to get in. Woo! Look what this guy left us with.
Where'd you guys go? To downtown?
Yeah, United.
Look at this.
Good guys. I like you a lot.
That's the main guy, right?
Look, this is how it left. The CBC article. Anyone see that CBC article? This is the unit. This is what I get left with. Everyone's jumping on how tough it is for the landlord, or how tough it is for the tenant. What about the landlord? Look what I have to deal with. This unit was mint in July when he moved in. These floors are ruined permanently. The fruit flies, the garbage. Like, how is this fair? He burned the window. He spray painted the window. That's spray paint. Like, me. I haven't got the other rooms yet. Oh, jeez.
You need a case for your face.
We gained access. It's actually cleaned up a ton from what it was. It's in much better shape now that all the needles and the junk and all that's gone. And now all you can see is just some destroyed floors, destroyed door, tons of little holes and knocks in the wall and things like that. You've got spray paint on the windows. Another window there, it's been completely broken. The floors just trashed. It's kind of disheartening, actually, as a landlord. When we bought this property maybe 90 days, like 3 months ago, and this unit was actually vacant, freshly painted, fresh floors, thought we were getting vacant possession, some sort of miscommunication with the previous owner's property managers. They placed what I'm calling basically a poor tenant placement. And so, unfortunately, in 2 months, the whole unit's been destroyed, and we had all this controversy with the CBC, where another tenant had to find a new place to live because she felt that she didn't want to live here anymore, it wasn't safe, etc. And I did basically all that I can, which is serve N5s and continue to work with the tenant to find them a new place. And in the end, ended up taking a bit of lost rent here. As you can see, thousands in damage, as well as having to actually pay him cash for keys for him to actually leave. So this is a situation where no one wins. Like, the tenant didn't win. I definitely didn't win. We've lost thousands here, right? So this is a loss for us as well. And a lot of people in the article, this is sort of like the retort of my side of the story, right? And the article, I don't think, played into the fact that the landlord, I'm just an average guy, right? We're just trying to make a few $100 in profit from this. It's not like we do this for free. and then this kind of thing happens, and this unit's profit for the next 2 or 3 years is probably gone for this $10,000 cleanup and renovation and loss of rent and having to pay the tenant. If you add all that up, the couple $100 in profit is potentially 3 to 5 years worth for this entire unit. So we could potentially have to work for free for 3 to 5 years, or even lose money. And so for all the people that jumped on in the comments or sent me messages that said like, greedy landlord, or like, you know, you should just eat that, like all this kind of evil stuff that people were sending, you need to see the other side of it too, and that the reason rent prices are increasing in London is because of situations like this. Will I have to now rent this unit out at market rent to recover my money over the next few years? Yes. That's why I can't rent this unit for less than market rent. Well, one, because that makes no sense. Why would I rent something for less than market rent? The market bears what it bears. But two, to recover all these damages, landlords have to charge higher rents. So rents tend to go up when these types of situations happen. And so it's stuff like this where we've got like, there's literally like spilled coffee's been sitting here probably for like days that's ruined the laminate floors. And now we have to rip them all out and redo it. Just like the countertops are now ruined. I have to take them out and redo them. Just a lot of little things here that, I guess the stove's now broken too, I heard, and other things like that. So windows broken, have to change those out. Spray painted the other window. Tons of damage to the drywall as well we're gonna have to repair, and then that means we have to repaint, which does suck because I don't have the exact color match on this one. So it is something that, you know, it's disheartening as a landlord that so many people in society think that it's just our job to eat the loss. And I don't think that's fair. I don't think it's my duty to be a social worker, to work with the tenant and end up having to lose thousands of dollars. Like, I don't want to pay money to do work. If you were a server, for instance, and you're watching this, and this is the example I use because I had a server actually reach out to me from the CBC article. And my kind of counter to their, like, you should give free rent to tenants, you should just, you know, give tenants exactly what they want. I was like, well, why don't you just work your 40 hours as a server for free? Like, why don't you serve people to help subsidize the cost of food? And it's like, whoa, no, I'd never do that. But you're rich, so you can do that. And it's like, most landlords are not rich, one. We're just average people. We're plumbers, like electricians, teachers. You know, we're servers too, some of us, right? And so we're just average people trying to make a little extra money with a side hustle or a side business. You don't go into the grocery store and say, hey, there's a homeless guy out front. Go give him $200 in groceries. No one does that. In fact, if you steal from the grocery store owner, even $5 in bread, you go to jail. That's criminally chargeable. If you steal rent, there's no criminal charge. Nothing happens. There's no mechanism. The police don't even care. So why is it you can steal $10 in food if you're starving and go to jail, and you can steal tens of thousands in rent, and the process takes many months to evict. It ends up being more than that sometimes with the damages in the units, and not be charged? Like, how can you steal rent and not be charged? That's something we should talk about more in the community. It's something that's not fair here in Ontario specifically. It's something that I know a lot of landlords are not happy about, and so there needs to be something done about that side of it. And so I'm here saying, yes, it's unfortunate that this happened, and I feel really bad for the tenant, Jessica, that had to move out. Yeah, it's an unfortunate situation. I did everything I could to work with him in several meetings, sat down with him and his social worker and his family as well, to finally get to this situation where we were able to find him a new place to go. The tenant in this place, we actually found him, we worked to get him, he's in some government housing now that's actually situated where he has social support there to help him recover. And actually, I think he's going to have a really good transition there and be in a much better position than being here on his own with some bad influences that kind of came around. And as you guys know from the article, there was a lot of, you know, drugs and things like that going on around this property. It's unfortunate that these kinds of things happen. I just don't think there's anything I could do beyond what I did. And so that's kind of what I'm saying. For all the people who are jumping on it, like attacking me, what more can a landlord do? I don't think it's reasonable to expect a landlord to come here at 1 o'clock in the morning when I get a call that there's drug dealers or friends of his congregating. That's not for me to go and disperse. That is for the police to do. And if the police don't do anything, the CBC should write an article on how the police don't do anything. That shouldn't be an attack on the landlord. It's easy to latch onto the landlord because they see landlords making profit. Let's attack, right? And I think that's unfair. So that's what this video is all about, is how you as a new landlord or new real estate investor cannot make these mistakes, how you can avoid these types of things from happening. Sometimes you inherit tenants and that sucks. I've done a lot of that, but I've also placed a ton of great tenants. And I have hundreds of great tenants, and my track record is very good when I do really good tenant screening. I find great tenants who love to take care of the property, who pay the rent, and I love those tenants, and we have a good relationship. It's, the 1% that sour the batch, right? So that's what we're talking about today, is how to avoid that whole situation as a new landlord.
I think Mike and myself both have the same perspective when it comes to tenants and the unfortunateness that is like the fact that like 1 or 2% of tenants like really can impact overall the entire like landscape for landlords. And I think what a lot of people don't understand, they have good intentions, but they don't realize that by really kind of like abetting and helping these bad tenants, by making it really difficult for us to evict them, by making it really difficult for the police or us to enforce like, good social norms and stuff like that, that actually impacts all the good tenants, right? And so if you don't mind just kind of elaborating on that, Mike, a bit, I think it's important for the audience to hear it.
Yeah, I think that is an important piece, that it's like the 2% or the 3% that do this sort of damage or that have these social issues that create, the current housing situation we have now, where landlords have to charge rents that may seem unreasonable for the average tenant. And that's not necessarily something that the landlords...
If you guys are currently a property manager or landlord in Ontario, Canada, or aspiring to be, check out the video description down below or go to mattmckeever.com, where I have a free landlord starter kit for you guys. It's a free little mini video course with a lot of templates and best practices for landlords in Ontario, Canada.
It's like the 2% or the 3% that do this sort of damage or that have these social issues that create, the current housing situation we have now, where landlords have to charge rents that may seem unreasonable for, the average tenant. And that's not necessarily something that the landlords promoted or wanted to happen. We have to make a profit at the end of the day. Like, no one goes into landlording to lose money. It's just like, it's a business venture. We do it not because we enjoy collecting rent from tenants and fixing buildings and dealing with all the headaches and hassles. We do it because it's a job, right? And landlording, if done right, is a job, and you have to put time in and energy into it. And so I think that you should be rewarded for that. And the tenants that are great tenants, it's unfortunate because we don't know as landlords. Every time we rent a unit out, we roll the dice. We can do as much screening as we can to get the probabilities in our favor that there's going to be a great tenant there. But people fake, reference checks. People I've seen go to great lengths to Photoshop even things like bank statements and pay stubs. I've seen crazy things in some of the applications that I've received. And those tenants that are professional tenants, let's call them, that know how to milk the system and go from one house to the next not paying rent, they raise the rents for everyone else. And so it's a real, it's something that we need to actually, I think, in the society focus on. And we need to say, okay, what processes are in place to protect the landlord? Currently, the Landlord-Tenant Board, we have an eviction from, I have another property where we have a non-payment of rent. They haven't paid since March. And we got a tribunal hearing, I believe, in July. We're still waiting on the decision paper to be sent out. They're 4 weeks behind. We're past the sheriff date. They still can't even issue us the paperwork. So if anyone has any political pull right now, it'd be great if someone could reach out and contact your local MP and say, hey, we need more staffing around the Landlord-Tenant Board. We can't even get trials for many months. What the result is that these tenants who don't pay can go 6 or 8 months paying no rent. What happens if I have a property, a duplex in this case, it's a duplex, where I'm getting no rent on the main floor for 6 to 8 months? Now, that's not even my profit for the year, that's my profit for 2 years, potentially. Well, we have losses now for 2 years. What am I going to do when I get that unit back, have to spend $5,000, $10,000 cleaning it up, and then re-rent it? I'm going to have to rent it for enough to cover my costs, at least to break even. And so rents are going to go up. And the pushback is going to be, well, rents are really high. It's because of situations like this. And so instead of attacking the landlord and saying, hey, your rents are too high, take a loss, reach out to your local MP or your local government and say, hey, this system is currently broken. Tenants are abusing this system, and landlords have no mechanism. Can you create something here so that there is a way for the abusers to be properly dealt with and the landlords to be fairly treated so that we don't have to raise the rents? That will actually, what that will do, it'll decrease rents, right? If our costs go down, we pass that on to the tenants. If our hydro costs go up, our gas costs, our property taxes, if they go up, or even housing prices, which again, not something that we can really control, but housing prices going up also tends to increase rent prices. So all those things are factors at play, and if we can reduce one of the costs, one of the major costs, which is delinquency on rents with tenants and damages, that will go a long way, I think, for the good tenants. And so if you're a good tenant watching this, or you're a landlord, just know, there's no malice at all. Landlords actually, our customers are our tenants. So we value a good tenant. I definitely value a good tenant, and I appreciate that fact. It's the bottom 3% that we have to deal with, where there is no mechanism to evict the tenant. Or like this cash for keys thing everyone's talking about, that shouldn't even exist. Like if I have a tenant that's destroying a unit and there's literally nothing I can do but pay them money to leave, that's a symptom of a greater problem, right? Like everyone's attacking this cash for keys strategy. It's a legal strategy. You can pay a tenant cash and they can agree to leave. But we're only resorting to this as landlords because there is no other option. We're like, how can we reduce our loss as much as possible? And so by getting them out today means they can't do $10,000 more in damage. They can't go another 6 months not paying rent. And if you run the numbers, it actually makes sense to reach into your own pocket and pay a problem tenant to leave. And again, a symptom of a greater problem in our current society right now here in Ontario. And there needs to be something done about this.
So this is kind of a prime example of why tenant screening is so important, Mike. What can an aspiring or novice landlord learn from this situation so that they don't have to go through what you went through here?
Yeah, I think in this situation, I didn't place the tenant. Unfortunately, JDN Property Management placed this tenant. They failed on the tenant screening, and so that's why it's really important, if you are a landlord, to make sure you find a good property management company. A lot of them are looking just to make their money to place a tenant, and they don't care because they're not on the line, or they don't have any risk associated with placing a bad tenant, right? There's nothing, no one comes back on them. And so because there isn't a lot of, in fact in Ontario there is no property management licensing or anything. In Alberta and BC and many other provinces there are licenses required. Anyone can manage property here. There's no body or regulation at all. So that's one thing I think that you could improve upon that would make this situation better. But if you don't have property management, you're just managing yourself, I'm going to give you some pro tips on how to pick good tenants, because I've had really good success on all the tenants that I've placed. Now, I've inherited a ton of tenants. You probably follow along on my stories on Instagram at Mike Rosehart. You probably see a lot of the horror stories I've gone through. Those aren't tenants I've placed. Those are tenants that were placed upon me. I inherited, right, upon closing. Like in this situation, this property was actually vacant, but when I went to close, unfortunately, the property management company didn't get the memo that it was to remain vacant, and went against the direct email and order of the realtor and the owner, and unfortunately rented this unit out, and now we are at a loss. Some landlords may go after and try to sue those types of people. I'm not that type of person. I'm just going to take the loss and do what I can to move forward. I'm not a malice individual that reaches out and attacks. So it is what it is. Unfortunately, this tenant was placed and this situation happened, and it was unfortunate. That's all I can say. But the pro tips now, if you're going to be placing your own tenants, or if you're just starting in property management and want to learn how to place tenants, one of the places I like to start is just getting as much information as I can on the tenant. You need to spend at least a couple of hours thinking about those prospective tenants. A lot of landlords that you see that are just getting started, they'll go do 3 showings and someone's got cash ready to take the unit, and they're like, oh, this person has cash, and they got first and last, they're good to go. And they get excited about that, I think, and just excited that their unit's rented, and maybe just they don't want to do more work and do more showings, or I don't know what it is. I know for myself, when I first got started, I did some of that, where I was like, they have first and last month's rent? Awesome, like let's rent this out. Super exciting to be able to get it rented. But what I should have done is maybe said, hey, let's go through landlord reference checks. What I like to do is when I go sign a lease, I say, hey, can I meet at your place to sign a lease? That's something that you can just ask, and most good tenants will say, yeah, come on over. You come to me with a lease? That sounds awesome. I live over at this address. And when you get to see where they currently live, you can avoid this kind of thing. Because people who treat units like this, all their houses tend to look like that. And you'll go see where they live, and right quick, you'll know typically the type of tenant profile you're going to be dealing with. If they keep a clean house, that can be a good sign, right? The other thing I like to do is credit check, very important. Check someone's credit score. You can see if they have delinquencies with other bills in their life. If they can't pay their cell phone on time, or their utility bills on time, or other debts in their life, what makes you think they're going to be able to pay their rent on time? And even if they can pay now, maybe in a year from now when they run into hard times or struggles, what then, right? I think rent's one of the first places people tend to cut. I see that, where they'll chintz the landlord because they know they can get away with it. The current rules are not in a landlord's favor. We don't have a lot of recourse. It takes a long time to evict a tenant currently, and the landlord-tenant board's way backed up. And why are they backed up? Because there's lots of these situations happening here in Ontario, like hundreds of them. The board is full. You go and you see hundreds of these situations, and there's not a lot of, I think what happened is when they wrote the Residential Tenancy Act, it swung towards the tenant's favor, and before that it was in the landlord's favor in the 80s and 90s. And in, I think, 2001, 2003-ish, it started transitioning to being in the tenant's favor. I think we need a little bit of a reform to kind of swing the pendulum towards the middle, where it's balanced and fair, and that's what I think would help us in a lot of ways. But what else can you look for? I don't require this, but like the good tenants, I say if you wanted to offer up 60 or 90 days of bank statements, you can block out your account number just to show me the types of like income coming in. You can actually see what they're earning. It's easy to fake a pay stub. It's very hard to fake 60 or 90 days of bank history. Or credit card is another thing I've had good tenants offer up. I don't require it, but they've offered up like, hey, here's 60 days of my credit card statements and bank account and investment account, if they have any of that. And so you can look at that and say, how a person is currently earning their money, that tells you a lot. And how they spend the money also tells you a lot about a tenant potentially. So you can find red flags, like if there's things with drugs and stuff like that. You can find that sort of thing by looking at that extra information. Character references are great. Landlord references are very important. Some tenants do fake those too and get their friends to pretend they're their landlords. So you can actually, one of the things I do is when I'm on the phone doing the reference check, I'll go in, I'm a realtor, so I can look up who owns the property, and I'll just say, I'll ask them specific targeted questions to prove that they're the owner, and that's really easy to do. You can see who owns the property. You can ask them targeted stuff that only an owner might know, and that'll help you like verify that they actually are the landlord of that property. Another thing too is you can just meet up with them in person. You can say, hey, I'm just going by Tim Hortons here. You have 5 minutes to meet up just to talk about the tenant, and that's a great way. Like usually they're not going to go to that length to send a person in, to fake being their landlord reference in person. So that's something that's proved pretty good. There's lots of little other things you can do and things you can pick up on. As you place more tenants, you get a feel for what a good tenant looks like. A good tenant often has a job. They have income coming in. Those are things you can look for. They often keep their units very clean. So if you went and saw where they currently lived, typically they'll treat your unit the same as they're treating their current house, right? Things like that, you can kind of get a feel for the tenant, and just gut check too. I don't know how to quantify that, but you can get maybe it's just something that I've developed from placing a lot of tenants. I can get a feel within 5 minutes of meeting someone if they have like a substance abuse issue, or if there's something going on in their life that would make them maybe a high risk tenant. And as landlords, our job isn't to discriminate, it's just to do our best to find the lowest risk tenant, and that's within our right to do. We want to find the tenant has the highest probability of paying the rent and the highest probability of probably staying a long time. I like to look for tenants. I often will say, hey, are you interested in a 2-year lease? If I gave you a slight discount on your rent, or a 3-year lease. And some tenants actually ask for that. I have one ask for a 5-year lease. Now it's rare, but they say, hey, I want to stay here 5 years. To me as a landlord, that's amazing. I want a tenant that's going to stay in my single family house, let's say, for 5 years and cause no issues. Turnover is actually very expensive for a landlord. We often have a little bit of vacancy during the time that we're turning it over. It's a lot of work for us to post the unit, put it out on Kijiji and Facebook Marketplace and all the different channels, take pictures of the unit. Often when a tenant leaves, there's minor things like you got to pull, this is a substantial nail, but usually there's just little nails that you have to pull out. And things like, I don't even know if that's blood, but cleaning up these units takes, even for a good tenant, a little bit of time. You got to patch some holes, you got to do a little painting, a little cleanup. That cost associated with unit turnover is very high. So people were jumping on and saying like, oh, filthy greedy landlord looking for $100 more a month. I'm not changing out a unit for $100 more a month. That's gonna, like the amount of cost it is to get a tenant out, to pay them cash to leave for $100 or $200 a month, it just doesn't make sense. That isn't what I'm about. I would much prefer to have a tenant that's $100 or $200 under market rent. I'd much rather have that tenant stay than have the turnover costs associated with thousands of dollars potentially with lost rents while it's vacant, while I'm turning it around, and all the effort and energy. My time is very valuable, especially now. I don't want to be spending hours and hours showing the property and posting the property and checking references and doing all the work that's associated with placing a good tenant. And by the way, placing a good tenant takes a lot of work. If you've placed your tenant in an hour, you probably didn't do it right. There's a good gut check. Like if you went and showed it the first time and mentioned the first tenant that came and showed it, and they had first and last, and you did it in an hour, probably not the right tenant. Maybe you get lucky, but if you keep doing that again and again and again 20 times, you're going to have a situation like this. So don't do that. Be better. Hey everyone, if you want more raw, honest, real, in the field, real estate and personal finance, follow me along on Instagram at Mike Rosehart, or on YouTube at Mike Rosehart. My name's easy enough to spell, Rosehart. I'm sure Matt will have a link that you can click. And if you're just watching this video, jump in the comments, smash the like button, and I will watch all the comments in this video. So I'll be jumping in and engaging with you guys as well. So I'm looking forward to that engagement. And let's talk about this. If you had a horror tenant at some point that you've come across where you had a similar situation, let's hear about that. I think if we had dozens and dozens of these types of stories on this video, and we were to maybe send it to CBC and say, hey, look, here's the other side where tenants are not always treating landlords with the most respect and their units with the most respect. Look at the problem. I think one good outcome would be, I think, if we get enough attention with these types of videos to actually create change and create action. I think the action here is that the system is not fair for landlords right now. That's objective. You can talk to paralegals, you can talk to lawyers, you can talk to experts on the Residential Tenancy Act. It is not in the landlord's favor. It is in the tenant's favor currently. And so we need some change around that so these types of situations don't happen. So a landlord can come into a unit that looks like this and do something about it. Not in 6 months or a year, but actually have action, like 15 days or something more drastic, right? We can actually have teeth to do these types of things and correct these sorts of situations so they don't get out of hand and get to this point where a poor tenant has to leave because they don't feel safe just because there's nothing a landlord can really do in a quick, reasonable time frame. So yeah, thank you guys all so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in future videos.
Thanks again to Mike for taking the time to share his perspective and his side of the story. Not every investor would want to do a follow-up to that sort of article, so honestly, Mike, I really appreciate it. And guys, jump in that comment section and give Mike some support, because you know what? The comment section on CBC wasn't very friendly to Mike. He actually had a lot of haters reach out on Instagram as well, so it'd be great if you guys would reach out to him on Instagram. Jump over to his YouTube channel, just show him some support, because at the end of the day, the reason I'm documenting my journey, the reason Mike is documenting his journey is we want to make your journeys easier. We had to learn through the School of Hard Knocks. We're hoping to shave down your learning curve by producing content like this. So again, smash that like button, hit the subscribe button. I'll see you in the next video.